Ladies and gentlemen, it is Key Time Sports coming back to talk about my reactions from week 9 of the 2024 college football season. There was a lot of things that happened in college football week 9 this week. The Oregon Ducks, first time them being number one, and they showed why they are number one in beating Ole Miss. And then we had Alabama pretty much dominate Missouri. And also, we also had Texas A&M. Basically, well, I wasn't shocked by it, but they pulled off a win by only completing 8 passes. I'm going to get into all of that, but right now I want to talk about the Illinois Fighting Illini and the Oregon Ducks. Now, this game, I kind of figured that this game was going to be a blowout in Oregon's favor. Now, there were quite a few instances in this game where I looked and said that Oregon is just a better team, and they showed it. In the first quarter, now Oregon took a 7-0 lead, and I wasn't surprised. I was really surprised that Illinois didn't come out with some trick plays a little bit later on in the game when they got down by a huge margin. Because if you get down by a huge margin, you cannot just run regular pass plays and regular run plays. You have to throw a couple of trick plays here and there to keep the defense guessing, to keep the coaching staff guessing. But the Fighting Illini had no existence of a run game, or when it comes to creating trick plays, they didn't do any of that. Now I'm gonna give y'all a couple of stats when it comes to the Fighting Illini. Luke Altmaier, 17 of 35, 161 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions proved costly. The running game, 132 yards. That wasn't enough, obviously. The receivers, they had a decent game, but nobody didn't really take over the game. Now, as far as the Oregon side of things, Dylan Gabriel, 18 of 26, 291 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. The Oregon rushing game, that's where Oregon won this game at. When you have over 200 yards of rushing, you are going to win 85% of the time in college football. Actually, that's a stat too. When teams run the ball for over 200 yards, 85% of the time they win the game. So Oregon is the number one team in college football. Offensively, they are astounding. Defensively, they are great. They've always had a good defense throughout the last 4 or 5 years. Now we are able to see it on another level. And can Oregon keep this up? Because I was looking over the weekend where the Oregon Ducks have a 88% chance of making the college football playoff, and they have a 27% chance of being undefeated. Now, their next game, they have to go to Michigan. Michigan, they just won an upset against Michigan State. So we'll see what the Oregon Ducks do in Michigan. But all in all, this was a offensive coordination. But one thing, that there's one weakness where the Oregon Ducks have to improve on, and that is scoring after halftime. Their third quarter scoring is not great. And when you play against these top-notch teams, come playoff time, and if you want to get to the championship, Oregon, you are going to have to score in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter. And I'm not just talking about no 13, 16, 18 points. No, I'm talking about putting touchdowns on the board in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter. So that is what the Oregon Ducks have to improve upon. All in all, this was a good game. They are still number one. Illinois, they've dropped out of the top 25 altogether. Congratulations to the Oregon Ducks on winning your 8th game this season. Now, the next game I want to talk about is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish versus the Navy Shipmen. I looked at this game in its entirety, and one thing I can say, Navy just benefited from a suspect, watered down competition of a schedule during the first 6 weeks. Because the first 6 weeks, they had the lead in every game. They did not trail in their first 6 games. Then you get to this game, couple turnovers in the first quarter, and you already down by 14. So Navy, they had to switch up their playbook. And even when they tried to switch up their playbook, Notre Dame pretty much stopped them in their tracks. Second quarter, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, they scored 17 points. And on third down, I'm going to tell y'all on third down, this is where Navy struggled. 8 of 13 on third down for Notre Dame. Now, the Navy defense, they had a tough day. You're not going to win very many games when your opponent is converting 8 of 13 times on third down. And plus, Notre Dame went for it on fourth down one time, and they got the fourth down conversion. And another thing, Navy turned the ball over 6 times in this game. 6 times. Notre Dame didn't even have to punt the ball because of those 6 turnovers, because most of those turnovers that Navy had came in plus territory. Notre Dame was side up well. They had good field position throughout all of those turnovers. That's why you see the score so lopsided. And the little momentum that Navy had was quickly washed away after halftime, because the first possession after halftime, Notre Dame came out and put up a touchdown. And it was basically they were leading by 30 in the third quarter, and I basically just said that this game was over, and it was, because when you look at this now, Notre Dame almost had 500 yards of total offense. Navy had 312 yards of total offense. Now, Navy, what they need to do is they need to go back to the drawing board, and they need to put a plan in for legitimate and upper echelon competition, because what they did the first 6 weeks did not cut it against Notre Dame. Notre Dame, better competition, better players, better coaching staff. Navy, you got to get it together if you want to make it to the college football playoff. Now, one thing about Notre Dame, can Notre Dame keep this up? I believe they can, and I believe Notre Dame is going to make it to the college football playoff. But if they lose a game, then they are out of the college football playoff, because it's getting too late in the season for them to lose another game. And like I said, if they lose another game, they can kiss the college football playoff goodbye. All in all, this was a great game for Notre Dame, not so much for Navy. Navy, you're not even in the same conversation as Notre Dame. And that's what Notre Dame showed you. Notre Dame said that this team doesn't belong on the field with us. So that's all I have for the Notre Dame Navy game. The next game I want to talk about is the Missouri Tigers and Alabama Crimson Tide. Boy, They needed this. Alabama needed this game. They needed it so bad. I was I was praying and wishing that Alabama came out and dominated this game, and that is exactly what they did. Jalen Milroe, he had a good game, even though he didn't have a touchdown. He had a very efficient game. 16 of 26, 215 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The running game for the Alabama Crimson Tide really willed this team to victory. 271 yards on the ground. And I got to say something about the receivers. The receivers had a good game. Ryan Williams, my guy, he had a good 26-yard catch that proved that put Alabama in scoring position, and everybody else, Jeremy Bernard, Emmanuel Henderson Jr., C.J. Drippy, Kendrick Law, Robbie Oates, Justice Haynes, they all had catches in this game, and they had a huge imprint on this game. They really did. Now, as far as Alabama 6-2. Now, this coming Saturday, they have LSU. Can they win versus LSU? I believe that they can win versus LSU. And then they have a pretty much easy schedule after LSU, because we all know Oklahoma ain't doing nothing. Then we also know that they have Mercer. Now Mercer, they can beat Mercer by 50 if they wanted to. But when it comes to Alabama, for them to stay in the college football playoff conversation, they need to win versus LSU. If they don't win versus LSU, then their season is over and they just going to play a regular bowl game. That's all. But as far as Missouri, I said last year, Missouri surprised everybody. But I said last year was a one-off. And that's exactly what it was, because you see what Missouri is this year. Without Brady Cook, they straight garbage. They are a below average team. And Missouri, I know that the coach for Missouri, Eli Drinkowitz, he is a above average coach. Missouri, their season is done. Now that they do qualify for a bowl game, but with Brady Cook being injured, are they even going to be able to generate enough offense and enough plays for that bowl game, for them to win that bowl game? I don't think so. I think Missouri's season is done, and they not going to make it to the college football playoff. They not. But that's all I have for this game. Alabama, you saved your season for another week. Hopefully, we can win against LSU this week, and we could keep our college football playoff chances alive Saturday versus LSU. The next game I want to talk about is the Texas Longhorns and Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, Texas, this was a good bounce back game for you. Now, we all know that Vanderbilt is a force to be reckoned with, and Vanderbilt is going to be a tough outing for anybody. But what I like with the Texas Longhorns, what they did was they weathered the storm. Now, Quinn Ewers, he threw 2 interceptions in this game, but the Texas Longhorns defense came up, stood up, and stepped up when they needed to. And they needed to this game, because we all know what Vanderbilt is now. Vanderbilt, they can mess up a whole lot of stuff, shake up the rankings, and that's exactly what they did after Alabama. After they beat Alabama, it looked like that they was going to shake up the rankings, but Texas defense came up when it needed to. Now, I'm going to give y'all a couple of stats and their third down conversion success. Both teams, Quinn Ewers, 27 of 37, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Diego Pavia, 16 of 29, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So he had Diego Pavia had an average performance. Now, what kept Vanderbilt in the game was the run game. They had over 114 yards on the ground. Texas had 104 yards on the ground. And when it comes to their efficiency on third down, Texas, they were 9 of 15 on third down, and Vanderbilt was 3 of 12 on third down. And when you look at their total offense, Texas had 392 yards of total offense. Vanderbilt only had 269. So we know Vanderbilt is one of those young and upcoming teams. And Texas, we expect Texas to be in it for the long haul, to be in it come late December, early January. So Texas, you did good, but there's a lot that you can improve upon. Now, last week, Texas looked like a shell of themselves versus Georgia. This week, they came back, gave a good performance, not their best performance, not to Steve Sarkisian's liking, but they won a game. A win is a win. They did what they had to do versus Vanderbilt and won the game. So that's all I got for the Texas Longhorns and Vanderbilt Commodores game. The last game I want to talk about before I end this show is LSU and Texas A&M. Now, LSU, they had control of this game for 3.5 quarters. But what I can't understand is that Texas A&M quarterbacks, they only completed 8 passes combined, and LSU still loses. I mean, you got Garrett Nussmeier out here putting up over 400 yards passing, and you lose, and you still have trouble with the run game, LSU. I think we need to say LS who now. LS who? Because the running game, you only had 35 yards rushing in the entire game. Texas A&M, Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman. Connor Wigman was 6 of 18, 64 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Marcel Reed, 2 of 2, 70 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And I'm pretty sure everybody is asking when they look at these QB stats, where did these 38 points came from? Well, I'm going to tell you where these 38 points came from. The 38 points came from 3 quarterback runs from Marcel Reed. He had 3 running touchdowns. Le'Veon Moss had 2 touchdowns and 2 field goal and a field goal from the Texas A&M kicker. That's where these 5 touchdowns and 1 field goal came from. But LSU, third quarter, you are up by 17. No, you are up by 10, 17-7. And it's the middle of the third quarter, and I don't know what the LSU Tigers were running on offense, but Garrett Nussmeier, those 3 interceptions, 2 of them came in the third quarter, and that's what let Texas A&M back into the game. Now, I got to give credit where credit is due. Texas A&M, they did not look great in the first quarter or the second quarter. I was saying to myself, I'm like, Texas A&M might get blown out. But those interceptions, and credit to the Texas A&M defense, I'm going to tell you, the Texas A&M defense came through when it had to. Because third down efficiency, For the LSU Tigers, they were 8 of 17. In the fourth quarter, they were 2 of 6 in the fourth quarter on third down conversion, on third down efficiency for the LSU Tigers. Now, Texas A&M, the run game pretty much took this game over in the third and fourth, and no, excuse me, in the fourth quarter. Texas A&M's run game took over the game. And I've always heard throughout the season where Brian Kelly sits up there at that podium and says that we still have problems with this team. And you do, because you can't hold a lead. You can't put you have a quarterback that's turnover prone, and you have a defense that think when they get up by 10 or 20 points, the game is over. So I don't have any stock in LSU. I don't have any confidence in LSU anymore. I never did, because I was always skeptical about their defense coming into this season. But as far as Texas A&M, credit to Mike Elko for making this team a top-notch team and a force to be reckoned with in his first season. Texas A&M, they are going to cause problems for teams like Georgia, Texas, and I'm gonna leave it at that, because Texas A&M, we need to vote. Everybody in the audience and everybody abroad, America, we need to focus on Texas A&M, because Texas A&M, they can make it ugly. They can make it ugly for teams like Oregon, Georgia, Texas. They can make it ugly for teams like they did LSU and even Ole Miss. They can make it ugly for teams like that, these upper echelon teams. So, all in all, this was a very entertaining game. Congratulations to Texas A&M for having the #1 record in the SEC after 8 games. And also, LSU, you got to get your stuff together, because this is not good at all. Brian Kelly, you got to get your team focused. The offensive coordinator for the Tigers, LSU Tigers, has to call better plays. The defensive coordinator for the LSU Tigers have to call better plays when they have the lead. They didn't do that, and that's why they lost the game. And with that, those are my reactions to the 2024, week 9 of the 2024 college football season. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Click the notification bell to get notified of all of my reaction videos, shows, and other content. Also, like and follow Key City Sports on TikTok. And remember one last thing, the key is always on time.